Hey everybody, what's happening? It is a Thursday. Welcome into section 1904. I'm Darren Smith. John is taking the day off to do a little bit of golfing. It is Thursday, June 19th. It is Juneteenth. I'm sure for some, maybe working, maybe not working, or perhaps just a little bit unaware about what Juneteenth is. One of the things that I love most about John putting together the front row seat for Section 1904, which is your daily sports update emailed directly to you, probably by the time you had your first cup of coffee in the morning, is that John was thoughtful enough to put in a story about Juneteenth, so that if you're a little unfamiliar, right, we're not even sure. I'm sure some people are wondering, are you supposed to say Happy Juneteenth, or what are you supposed to do? Imagine being one of these social media managers at one of these companies today, trying to sell some patio furniture or whatever, and you're not quite sure what to do with Juneteenth. But John did include a story there, including also a story about the Lakers, the WNBA, Caitlin Clark, and all of the stuff about the Padres. We're not going to do too much on the Padres here today on Section 1904. This is going to primarily just be a conversation and interview podcast today. Alex Kirkland from ESPN and the Spanish Football Podcast is going to be our guest on Section 1904. And I will talk to Al, who's been in the U.S. for about a week now. I am a subscriber to the Spanish Football Podcast. It's a podcast, as you might expect, about Spanish football, Spanish soccer, about Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Valencia, and Atletico Madrid. If you're a fan of Spanish soccer, you should listen to the Spanish Football Podcast. If you're a fan of European soccer, if you're a fan of food and culture, I would recommend this as well, because they do a lot of stuff. They do a segment called Rincón Cultural, where they talk about all of the food and culture and travel tips, travel hacks around Spain. So we will talk to the producer and one of the hosts of the Spanish Football Podcast, who also works for ESPN. You can read him at ESPN.com. You can see him on ESPN FC. Alex Kirkland will be on the podcast today, talking about Real Madrid, talking about the tournament, the stadium, the food that he's been eating since he's been here. I mean, Padres lose last night, just to give you a minute on it, because I don't know that I have a lot of things to say that are going to be that different than you could listen to for hours on local sports radio this afternoon. I mean, we're just in the suck right now. And, you know, anything that can go wrong seemingly will go wrong. And you look down and it's demoralizing. There's no doubt about it. I don't know what stage everybody's in. I don't want to say what stage of grief, because, I mean, good God, there's 90 plus games to go. But that being said, it feels demoralizing not only to lose and be 1-5 against the Dodgers up until this point, but to look down and look at the list of names that have been on the winning pitcher side of this, from Yates to Trevino to Kasparius to Sauer and Robleski. I mean, if you would have said before the season, hey, those first times through with the Dodgers, Padres are going to be 1-5. You'd be like, oh, well, what do you expect? They got Blake Snell and Yamamoto and Glasnow. And, you know, it's just not been that. So it does feel a little bit demoralizing that you see two guys yesterday. And granted, one of these guys, I guess, is a prospect, one of their top prospects. But, to me, they're just names. They're just names. They're not players that anybody thought the Dodgers were going to be relying on for big rivalry type games between the Padres and the Dodgers. These weren't the key players that we were anticipating when the season began. So it does add a little bit of the insult on top of what it is that's happening. And obviously there's a moment then when Xander Bogaerts finally does something and you feel good about it for like 30 seconds before Will Smith walks it off against Robert Suarez on an 0-2 pitch, a changeup that was just hanging there over the bottom of the plate. I know John will talk about this on Friday when he's back. John has been he's on to he wants to know why Robert Suarez's numbers with Diaz as the catcher are so dramatically different than they are with anybody else. And the only possible explanation I could offer up, although I'm not so sure that there's anything to it. I'm not saying there's not. I'm just not so sure. Maybe Diaz tips a pitch. I'm not sure. Maybe Diaz, the catcher, is tipping a pitch. I don't know what to make of that, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. There's one more game, and of course it's going to be at 7 o'clock tonight, and I suppose I will be watching some NBA Finals, and I don't know how much anticipation I have to watch this game, the Padres and the Dodgers. It'll be on. I'm sure I'll get into it at some point, but it just I'm ready for this series to be over. All right. So before we say hello to Alex Kirkland, Mexico played last night. The U.S. men's national team plays tonight. I understand for a lot of people who are casual soccer fans or not soccer fans at all, this is a lot. We just got through the seasons. We're in the middle of the MLS season. And now there's 2 tournaments being played simultaneously in the United States, and it's confusing for people, even soccer fans that I know. My friend AJ Cassavell, he's like, it's just too much. Just too much soccer for me. That being said, I've got a lot of bandwidth for this, so I'm looking forward to watching everything that's coming up. You know, give me a little bit more. Going to try to get out there and do a little paddleboarding today, but I'll make my way to a television to watch the Club World Cup and see if I can watch Inter Miami a little later on. Can an MLS club actually get a win in the FIFA Club World Cup? I don't know. We'll see. But between the 2 tournaments being played simultaneously, there's a lot to talk about. And I'm glad we had a chance to chat with Alex Kirkland. So he is England-born, living in Madrid, working for ESPN in the United States to cover the World Cup. Our conversation with Alex Kirkland from ESPN and the Spanish Football Podcast. He's had quite a week. If I have this right, within the last 6-7 days, from Madrid to Los Angeles to South Florida, taking in a couple of Club World Cup matches, Alex Kirkland on Section 1904. Al, good to chat with you. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, Darren. And yeah, after this, I'm up to Charlotte, Philadelphia, then New York, and then home. So yeah, it's a busy couple of weeks for me, but I'm having a good time so far.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. And I appreciate that so many of the listeners of the Spanish Football Podcast, so many of the subscribers, the Patreons, as I am one of them, have offered you plenty of suggestions of places to eat. I know usually it goes in reverse. I just got back from Spain. Yeah. And I was saying to you, I've taken your advice more than once on different destinations for me to go and eat. How have the listeners of the Spanish Football Podcast treated you? How have they done just in their recommendations for food?
Yeah, look, I think our listeners know that as much as I love my football, I love my food even more. That's my true passion in life. So no, it's been nice to be on the receiving end for once. It's a big part of our podcast, which is not just about Spanish football, but about Spanish culture and kind of immersing yourself in Spanish life. And so, like I say, it's been good to get some tips, some recommendations from our listeners while I'm here in the US. And so far, I have to say, the hit rate has been very, very high. I haven't been led astray so far. I've had a couple of splendid meals, both in LA and here in Florida so far. And yeah, I've been guided almost entirely by recommendations. So it's been good.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit. I won't talk too much about South Florida since we're a Southern California-based podcast here, but tell us a little bit about the Southern California cuisine. I think you had some hot chicken, if I'm not mistaken, in Pasadena.
Yeah, listen, I was told one thing. If there was one thing that I was going to do in my time in LA, I was told that I had to go to Howlin' Ray's hot chicken. And boy, am I glad that I did. It was sensational. I made a bit of an effort. This was on Sunday. I went to Atletico Madrid against Paris Saint-Germain at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. And then I had a few hours to kill afterwards before I jumped on the overnight flight here to the East Coast. And so what did I do? I headed down to Howlin' Ray's in Pasadena, which I have to say I wasn't aware of previously, but I now get the impression it is literally a hotspot. It's a bit of a kind of a viral sensation because people were queuing out of the door, and I think they're queuing there pretty much every day to get their hot chicken. So I did have to queue outside in the sunshine. The staff were kind enough to come around every now and then with umbrellas to give people in the queue, so we didn't suffer too much with the sun. And look, I'm not usually big on like queuing to eat somewhere. I kind of want to, if I want to go eat, I want to make a reservation, turn up at the right time, and sit down. I'm not really one generally for queuing, especially if it so often it's kind of a social media kind of hype thing, right? And you feel like you're kind of maybe wasting your time. But no, this was worth the wait. I think it was. Look, I'm not an expert, but I think it was the best kind of fried chicken that I certainly have ever had. And so, if any of your listeners are ever in either Pasadena, or I think the original location is kind of in more in downtown LA, I would recommend stopping by Howlin' Ray's for sure.
Howling Rays. Okay. And by the way, of all the times that I've been to Spain, I think I'm going on 8, 9 different trips here. I don't know that I've ever seen hot chicken or even gone out of my way for hot chicken. I might not have been looking for it, but is it something that you could find where you live?
Well, you know what? No, in Spain in general, and of course this is a generalization, but they're not big on spice. They're not big on heat. Of course, you get some dishes might think about a classic dish like patatas bravas, for example, which are kind of potatoes, fried potatoes with a kind of a spicy tomatoey sauce on top. That of course has got a little bit of heat, but generally you don't get a lot of spice, and in fact, when you do, it tends to be toned down for Spanish palates. So when you might go to a restaurant that otherwise, either in another country or at home for me in the UK would be spicy, it won't be as spicy in Spain, whether that's kind of, I don't know, Mexican food or, I don't know, Indian food or whatever. So no, in general in Spain, you don't get a lot of spice. And I have to say at Howlin' Ray's, you could you could choose your spice level. And I went for mild. I'm not ashamed to say I went for mild, and it was hot enough for me. I can't imagine what the extra hot is like. But yeah, it was great. I loved it.
Speaking of, you mentioned patatas bravas, and I learned this morning when I woke up on Instagram that today is, in fact, fortunate timing for us. It is World Tapas Day. What would
Yeah,
be
I didn't know that.
I didn't either. Thank James Blick on Instagram. What would you consider to be the classic Spanish tapas? Is it patatas bravas? It is something else? Is it pan con tomato? What would you say it is from all of your travel and experience?
Yeah, I mean, every day is tapas day in Spain. But look, in a way, it's funny, isn't it? Because internationally, I guess tapas has become kind of shorthand for just Spanish food. Really, of course, the origin of tapa. Well, it's one of these things where there are kind of different theories, but the most common theory is that it was a plate of food given to you with your drink, and you might use the plate to kind of cover the drink, literally like a lid, tapa in Spanish. And so tapas is kind of all encompassing. It could really apply to any kind of typical Spanish food, and like around the world, you get they call them tapas restaurants, but in Spain, there's no such thing as a tapas restaurant. It's just a restaurant. It doesn't really exist. In terms of dishes, we've had this discussion on our podcast as well. I think my co-host Phil made fun of me once for picking patatas bravas as maybe one of my top tapas. Now, my argument would be it's one of those dishes where I think when it's good, it's absolutely sensational, but it depends on a lot of factors, right? Your potatoes need to be, sufficiently cooked. They got to be crispy on the outside. They got to be soft on the inside. The sauce has to be kind of rich with a bit of heat. So there are a lot of factors. They can be good, they can be bad, depending on where you are. I mean, there are many. I'm kind of a meat guy in general, so some nice albondigas, some meatballs are good for me. But yeah, it depends who you talk to. Other people might go for a more kind of seafoody kind of option, like some fried fish or some squid or something like that. And of course, as well, it varies depending on where you are in Spain. Generally, my favorite part of Spain for food is the Basque Country, and of course, they are called pinchos rather than tapas. The pinchos is literally the little stick that the food comes on. So for me, generally, I'm more of a pinchos guy.
Right. And by the way, I would just take this opportunity to tell everybody that's listening to this, the first time and the only time that I've been to the Basque Country, as a matter of fact, I took some of Al's recommendations in San Sebastian. So yes, absolutely. Bar Nestor was an absolute hit for me.
I mean,
and
San
some of those
Sebastian
places up there.
It's the greatest for me. It's the greatest food city anywhere in the world. It's a place where if you ever get the chance to go, you must go. You walk around, you go into these bars, and the bar is full of these incredible pinchos of food. And I love the attitude and the way it works over there, Darren. I'm sure you saw this as well, which is, you go into a bar, you kind of pick the pinchos that you like, sometimes with the help of the staff behind the bar, or in some places you kind of do it yourself, and they just keep track of your order. I don't know how they do it, but it's not, you don't have to pay in the moment. They trust you not to kind of just have your drink and your food and walk off. They kind of keep a tab behind the bar, keeping track of what you've eaten and what you've drunk, and at the end they give you the bill. It's a nice kind of honesty system, which I think is quite refreshing.
Well, you know what I learned last time, actually, and then we'll get to the football. Is because we were in Girona and we went to a Basque restaurant, and it's funny that you say that about, well, how are they going to keep tabs on the things that we're doing? And you mentioned the pinchos, the stick, and what we
Yeah,
saw was the server walked up and he just saw the amount of sticks that we had on the table,
counted the
and
sticks. Yeah,
that's how he went ahead and said, well, this is
and
what
it's
your bill is
sometimes
going to be
like
at the
if
end.
they have different kinds of sticks for a different price point, so they can
Right.
tell from the shape of the little stick whether it was a €2 pincho, a €3 pincho, or whatever. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, that's the other part of it. Is there a little bit of a culture shock just in terms of the pricing here in the States? Because I know when we got back
I
from
know.
Spain, we went, wait,
Yeah.
$12 for a coffee? What are we doing?
I'm jealous for you guys heading to Spain on holiday and getting to enjoy how cheap it is, rather than for us coming over here to the States. When I've got to say, when you're used to the just how affordable life in Spain is, you come here and wow, when I was in LA in particular, I mean everything, but especially food and drink, and even very simple things like the cost of an Uber across town or whatever. It's yeah, for someone who lives overseas in a more affordable country, it's quite a an eye opener.
Yeah, well, that's fine. It's I'm sure it'll be part of the submission for ESPN's expense reports, right? So just
Yeah.
they're
As
used to
much as I
that.
can put on expenses, yeah. Howlin' Rays was thanks to the Disney Corporation.
Al, I don't know that you are in the States primarily to cover the Spanish clubs and the FIFA Club World Cup, but
Yeah,
I know that you have seen both Atletico Madrid and now Real Madrid play at least once. The president of La Liga, the Spanish soccer league, came out and was pretty critical of this tournament. I wonder what you made. Javier Tebas, he's a polarizing figure in Spain, I think, to say the least. I wonder, what you made of his comments that he just doesn't think that this is a tournament that's a good idea for the clubs that are in Spain.
yeah. I'm trying to think who the kind of US equivalent of Javier Tebas might be. He's a very high profile, very vocal president of the Spanish Football League, as you say. And of course, you have to remember that he is always speaking, as is right, from the position of the best interests of the league, and the league which represents all of the clubs in Spain. And of course, the problem that La Liga have, as well as a number of other soccer leagues around the world have, is they feel that this new international tournament, because this is the first edition of the FIFA Club World Cup this summer, it's never been held before in this format. They feel like it is a threat in some ways to what the domestic leagues do. Now, part of that is about the calendar. It's a very, very busy calendar for these soccer players. They don't get much rest at all. One of the few periods of rest that they get is over the summer. Not every year, because we get the World Cup or the Copa America or the Gold Cup or the Euros or whatever. But adding an extra summer tournament right now, which is when soccer players would normally be on their holidays, makes a huge difference in terms of the workload on the players and fatigue and injuries and burnout and stuff like that. So part of it is about that. And the other big objection, I think, from Tebas is about the money. Now, this is a very lucrative tournament, FIFA, because of the investment they've managed to bring into this tournament, which is quite a complicated issue, but a lot of it has actually come from Saudi Arabia, who, of course, are investing a lot internationally in all kinds of sports. They're talking about a potential jackpot for the winning team at this Club World Cup of, I think, up to $125 million or something like that, which is a huge amount. In terms of prize money for a soccer tournament, I think that's pretty much unprecedented. Of course, there's big money in competitions like the Champions League in Europe and things like that, but that's a lot of money. And so someone like Tebas, who represents all Spanish clubs in the top two divisions, is worried about that in terms of a further disparity between the rich and the poor, about the rich clubs getting richer because of opportunities like this, and therefore the kind of the widening gap between them and the rest.
And do you get the sense, you were around Real Madrid a little bit, you've been around Atletico Madrid. Do you get the sense, I mean, Real Madrid has won this tournament 5 different times. Now, again, as Al points out, this is the first iteration of this, these 32 teams and it being played in the summer. Are they all in it to win it? I mean, it's a new coach, it's a new handful of players, new squad, et cetera. Are they here to kind of iron through some stuff as sort of an on-ramp to the upcoming season? How is it that you get the sense that the Spanish clubs in particular are viewing this tournament here over the next couple of weeks?
I mean, for Real Madrid, it's a huge deal because their season was a failure. They've ended the regular season, without a major trophy for the first time since 2021. Real Madrid see themselves, and probably correctly, as the biggest club in the world. They expect to win every single tournament they play in. They're not used to not winning things. And so this is a chance for them kind of to, I guess, to start to rebuild, to kind of redeem themselves for last season. As you mentioned, they've got a new coach in the former player Xabi Alonso, one of the most highly rated young coaches in world soccer. They've got some new players, brought in 2 new defenders, for example, in Housen and Alexander Arnold for this tournament. So they're looking to.
I thought he was just Trent. I thought he was just Trent. Now I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, he's rebranded himself as Trent because the surname Alexander Arnold he said might cause confusion in Spain. So he's just Trent now. So yeah, look, they want to win it. It's a big deal for them. But you're right. It comes, of course, at a time of transition. I mentioned the new coach. He's only taken, I think, 9 days training or something like that with the team. Some of the players have only been there for a few days because they came back late, and so it's too early. I was there at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami yesterday for their debut game. They drew 1-1 with the Saudi side Al Hilal, who are quite a good team actually, and you could see that it's much too early for Alonso to have kind of got across his ideas, the changes he wants to make. There wasn't a lot there. There weren't really many signs of this team being radically different from the old team. But like I say, maybe it's too much to expect anything else because it's such early days. So for Madrid, yeah, there's a lot riding on this tournament. In terms of Atletico Madrid, I think they are happy to be here because, of course, there are 2 Spanish teams here, Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid. And, in the normal order of things, the other Spanish team here, apart from Real, would be Barcelona because, of course, Barca are the other big team or the biggest team in Spanish football. And so for Atleti to be one of Spain's 2 representatives here rather than Barca is a big deal. Let's see how they get on. Of course, I was there at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena on Sunday when they got hammered 4-0 by PSG in their opening game. And they're now under pressure. As we speak now, they've got their second game coming up later on today in Seattle against Seattle Sounders. And they've really, I don't think, have to win that if they're going to have a chance of going through.
I think if I have this right, Real Madrid is the only club to have sold out its entire ticket allotment. I wonder who are the people who are buying these tickets. I remember about 10 years ago, Barcelona came out to the West Coast. They played against Manchester United, and we were up in San Jose, my wife and I, my now wife. And I remember we bumped into a couple, a family that was traveling from Barcelona, and they said, "Oh yeah, this is our summer holiday. We're just going to follow Barcelona around here through the summer. We're going to spend our time here going from this city, maybe to Dallas, off to Miami or what have you." Did you get the sense being around it? I know it's hard to ask 60,000 people where they came from, but did you get the sense that people, it's a massive club. They have fans all over the globe, obviously, but do you get the sense that it's a lot of people that are following the club and traveling with the club? Or is it just a lot of people maybe in the United States? You guys have a lot of listeners in the States that have said, hey, that's Real Madrid. We're going to go watch them play.
So firstly, you're right. I think, of course, attendances have been a big kind of hot topic in this tournament. We've seen a real disparity in terms of attendances from sellouts to very, almost empty stadiums. And yes, Real Madrid are one of the big draws. I think you're right, 2 of the 3 group stage games are sellouts, and the other one was almost a sellout, something like that. So yeah, Real Madrid is certainly a big draw. Look, I think there's no question that here in the States, certainly in the not only in the Hispanic community, but especially in the Hispanic community, Real Madrid and Barcelona are huge. And so I think from being at the game, certainly in a place like Miami, yesterday, of course, lots and lots of the fans, maybe even the majority of the fans, are Latinos, are part of the Hispanic community here in the US. In terms of traveling fans, I don't think there are that many. I think that certainly in terms of Real Madrid fans from back home in Spain and in Madrid, I think partly because of what we discussed, because of costs, coming over here for the summer and going to games would be a real kind of financial commitment. Of course, a lot of them could do that. But I'm not sure that many would be. I think the vast majority are either based here in the US or maybe traveling from other countries in North America or even in Latin America for the chance to see Real Madrid play in a competitive game, which they don't get the chance to do very often. Because normally here, as you know, in previous years, it's just kind of pre-season friendlies and that's all you've got. But we've certainly seen, even in those pre-season friendlies in previous summers, those Real Madrid games have been played at some of the very biggest stadiums in the US, right? You're talking about some of these giant kind of college football stadiums like the Big House or wherever, and Real Madrid have filled those stadiums just for friendlies in the past. So there's no doubt the demand is there.
Yeah, by the way, that even more evidence, right, that we're going to get La Liga regular season matches here, I suppose. For better or for worse.
I think it's inevitable. La Liga are determined to do it as soon as possible. As you say, they've been trying for a few years now. There were some issues in terms of how they get permission to do that, because it's not just about La Liga. There's also the Spanish Football Federation that had to give the okay for something like that to happen, and FIFA as well. But those bodies having opposed it in the past, are now on board. And so basically, as soon as La Liga can get that done in terms of getting two clubs to agree to play one of their games in the US, and jumping through those kind of logistical hoops in time, that will happen. They've had a couple of false starts in the last couple of years, but it's going to happen. There's no question. Like you say, whatever kind of concerns you might have about how that impacts the competition, the fairness of the competition, there are all kinds of issues there. But I mean, it is the reality. That is the way that sport is heading. We see it in tournaments like this Club World Cup. We see it with those attempts from La Liga, and they're not the only ones. You know, a lot of leagues are looking to do similar things. We've seen it with the Spanish. I was in Saudi Arabia in January, for example, for the Spanish Super Cup, which is held in Saudi Arabia now every year because of a deal that the Spanish Federation did with the Saudis. So yeah, it's the future.
You were here last summer for Copa America. You're here this year for Club World Cup. Obviously, the World Cup is going to be here next year. What is your experience from last summer to this summer? What does any of it indicate to you about what the World Cup will be like next year?
It was interesting. Actually,
you can feel free to be honest, and you're not going to have my feelings about this.
No, interesting being at Hard Rock Stadium yesterday, because I was there a year ago as well for Copa America, not for the final where there were some real problems with crowd control, but I was there for one of the earlier games, and talking to colleagues who were there for the Copa America final last year and were there again yesterday. Huge differences in terms of security, in terms of the way it was handled. That comes down to the organisers, of course, because FIFA, I think, took some of the lessons from CONMEBOL, who organised the Copa America last year, what they got wrong in terms of crowd control. There was basically a whole additional kind of ring of security around the stadium, which just wasn't there a year ago for Copa America, and that's here now. So fans, if you don't have a ticket, you cannot get anywhere near that stadium in a way that you could for the Copa America last year. So clearly FIFA have learned some lessons. I get the impression that this tournament is a big deal in itself, but it is also a bit of a trial run for FIFA ahead of the World Cup next summer. There's no doubt they're looking to learn lessons in terms of organisation, how everything works. The World Cup is another order of magnitude in terms of the scale of it. The number of, and it's getting bigger all the time, of course, the number of teams involved, the number of host cities. I'm hoping to be back for the World Cup next summer. I don't have that confirmed yet, but I'd love to be here, whether it's here or Canada or Mexico. I just don't know, but I'm keen to be back. But yeah, like I say, the World Cup is such a bigger deal. I mean, this Club World Cup, look, we're into it because we're soccer fans. But you ask average people here, and when I've spoken to people here, they don't know it's happening. It's got a very low profile. I've seen I think I saw one billboard in LA advertising this competition. I've seen one here in Miami, but otherwise, naturally, because it's the first of its kind, because it's soccer, there's lots. I'm talking to you here from my hotel in Fort Lauderdale. And folks here were a lot more concerned about the Stanley Cup finals and Game 6 the other night with the Panthers than they were with the Club World Cup, which is, it's entirely understandable.
I could go on. I know I'm taking up too much of your time, but I do have one final question, just because it always stands out to me when I travel to Spain. And, working with the MLS club here in San Diego, which is, halfway through its first season ever. But, we do have a couple of people who work for this club who have lived in Barcelona and who understand what the sport means, who understand what it is to have, football culture around you 365 days a year. As you and I are chatting, the women's team is the current World Cup winner. The Spanish national team is the current European champ, right? They're the favorites to win the World Cup next summer here in the United States. What is it about Spain and Spanish football that makes it so good? I realize this is a question that you could probably give an hour commentary on, but I wonder, if you could just talk to us a little bit, because I know people with the club that I work for that are like, someday that's going to be us, just watching kids kicking a ball down the street or watching a kid kick a ball up against the wall, etc., just to establish that type of culture. I wonder if you could just, in a couple of sentences or whatever, put into words what it is that the sport of football means to people in Spain and why it's so important and why they're so successful at it.
Yeah, that's a big question, Darren. And like you say, it's something that we could talk about for a long time. I guess there are a number of factors. One of them is, as you say, very basically, it is so deeply ingrained in the culture from a very young age. You see kids kicking a ball around everywhere all the time. It's the sport. It's the number one sport. At times it feels like it's almost the only sport. in a way that's of course very different here in the States when you're trying to compete with American football and basketball and baseball and hockey. What Spain has done incredibly successfully, I think, in the last kind of 20 years or so, probably really, Spanish coaching has become the elite. And we've seen Spanish coaches being exported around the world as well, trying to bring kind of Spanish style football to other countries, really ever since, that kind of golden era that the Spanish men's national team had in from 2008 to 2012 when they won 3 major tournaments back to back. So I think Spanish coaching has been elite, and they've, again, the reasons for that I think are complex, but there's in terms of the numbers of coaches that Spain produces. You look at the number of people involved in coaching programs, getting their coaching badges, qualifications, that kind of thing. It's something that's worthy of investigation and further study. Much has been made, for example, right now, looking at the English Premier League, the number of coaches that are not just Spanish, but are from one very small part of Spain. We talk about the Basque Country, the number of Basque countries in the English Premier League. When you think about Mikel Arteta, Unai Emery, Iraola at Bournemouth, I'm sure I'm forgetting others. That is extraordinary, and it's hard to put your finger on exactly what it is. But there's certainly, part of it is cultural. Part of it, I think, is about the way that they've kind of invested in grassroots and coaching. But these are things that there's only so much you can do, I guess, in terms of artificially kind of stimulating it. I don't know, but Spain has enjoyed this kind of privileged position in the football world for years now. Look, Spanish internationally, the Spanish national team historically hasn't always been successful. That's a relatively recent development. It had been pretty kind of sparse before, like I say, that golden era in the 2000s. But what they have had, of course, and they have had for many, many years now, is 2 of the absolute biggest clubs in world football in Real Madrid and Barcelona, and a healthy league structure, and not just big clubs, but smaller clubs being kind of significant institutions culturally all over the country in cities and towns and villages. But man, it's a topic that we could talk about all day and not get to the bottom of.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a fascinating thing when you go there, like I said, because it's just always right in front of you in Spain. It's one of the multitude of things that I love about visiting Spain, every opportunity that I get. Alex, we appreciate it. On your travels here, we hope that we have people that will help and chime in, and you're going to Charlotte. Where else did you say you're heading?
Yeah, I'm following Real Madrid for the
Okay.
group stage of this tournament. So I'm at their game in Charlotte, at their game in Philadelphia. I think I'll be at a round of 16 game in Philadelphia. Whoever's involved in that as well, and then I'm done. I'm off. I'm not involved in the from the quarterfinals and onwards. I'm on holiday.
Okay, good. Well, if you're a subscriber to the Spanish Football Podcast, and I will say I have tried to model a little bit of this podcast after all the years of listening and experiencing just how interactive you guys are, whether it's WhatsApp or the Discord channel. We do appreciate everything that you do there, but help Alex out if you have any food recommendations on the cities that he's visiting. I'm sure he would appreciate it, and your diaries from the Club World Cup have been a lot of fun to listen to. Al, I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very much for doing this.
That's my pleasure, Darren. Thank you.
Give him a shout on social media if you know any good food recommendations where he's heading. By all means, I think Philadelphia is pretty self-explanatory. I can't imagine that somebody like Al isn't going to go find himself a cheesesteak someplace. But if you know a place in Charlotte or some other type of food in Philadelphia, that's what sports is all about for me. It's one of the things I love most about going to Spain. My wife and I, that's why we're so attracted to it. Food, football, and wine. It's got all the things that we love. Has great weather. And when I tell you that literally I found myself in restaurants texting back and forth and direct messaging with Al, a guy that I never met and never spoke to directly before today, just interacted a little bit on Patreon or on Discord. I mean, that was the first time he and I ever chatted. And I thank him for countless meals on the different trips that we've made to Spain. So if we could return the favor, I would appreciate that. All right. So that's probably going to be a wrap for today. Reminder, you can go back and you can find yesterday's conversation with Jared Diamond of the Wall Street Journal. I thought there was so much good information from Jared about what Rob Manfred envisions for the future of broadcast rights with Major League Baseball that I had never seen reported and I had never heard of before. I had a theory in my mind that they wanted to take all of the rights and put them on one streaming service. That is actually what happens. That is what is happening in Major League Baseball. And it does sound like I'm very skeptical and cynical of Major League Baseball owners when they start crying the blues. But I do feel like this is a different era. You have 4 or 5 teams now with no TV rights. They have no TV broadcast deals or non-competitive television broadcast deals. And maybe the crisis is that they're not going to make as much money. And that not necessarily is something that anybody's going to cry over. But it does feel like we're entering a real level of competitive imbalance that we haven't quite seen with just the changing landscape of media. So I thought there was a lot of good info there. And I really did like the super nerdy stuff about the strike zone too. I mean, I'm unapologetically still trying to figure out what is a strike. A strike is what the umpire is going to call. So, but we are headed down a pathway here that is going to look a lot different in the future. That's for down the road. So, all right, I'm off to watch a little bit of soccer and enjoy the afternoon. And I hope everybody does the same. And as mentioned, thank you everybody for your support. We do appreciate it, and we do really, really rely on you guys to keep this afloat. You know, we're just getting started. I mentioned the Spanish Football Podcast. I think I've been a subscriber now, paying what a lot of you are paying, about $5 a month. I think maybe I'm paying $10 a month now, so that I can get access to their Discord channel. And I've met people there and interacted with people there in different countries. It's it's a lot of fun to be part of a community. Hopefully that's the experience that many of you are getting here with Section 1904. But we're just getting started. We appreciate your support, and I'll pop in and out of the Discord channel a little later on, just to take the pulse of what it is that's happening. But enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and we will do it again on Friday.